here. Why are we here? Today is not primarily about learning songs, learning gear, or learning theory. It's about learning why what we do matters. Whether you sing, play, mix cue lights, or run slides, none of us are here by accident. God has chosen you to use ordinary people, ordinary tools, and ordinary moments to communicate His eternal truths. Worship does not begin with a guitar chord or a light cue. Worship begins with God revealing Himself and His people responding. From the very beginning of Scripture, God speaks and creation listens. Light appears, sound vibrates, and order emerges. Music, sound, and lights are not modern inventions or church accessories. They are part of created order that God has designed to communicate His glory. Tonight we're going to walk through where Western music comes from, music theory, biblical theology of music and worship, why sound and visual and preparation matter, and how worship team and production teams can serve together as one body. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming faithful stewards. Our goal is simple: to remove distractions, bring clarity, and help God's people hear, see, and respond to the gospel. Well, that's being said, we'll start from the beginning, not with us, but with the order, creation, and a God who speaks. So, we'll start with where it came from, the development of the Western music. It started out with music as created order and meaning in the ancient world. Western music begins with the Greeks, like Pythagoras, Plato, and Aristotle. Music was understood as mathematical order and moral function. Specifically, Pythagoras, who was from 570 to 490 BC, he discovered mathematical ratios in music intervals. That's like your octaves, your fifths, and the fourths. And that established music to follow objective laws, and that also established consonance and dissonance are rooted in creation. So this matters because Western music theory begins as a discovery, not an invention, and order reflects God's design. And then it moves into the early church through the 5th century. This was really word-centered music. The early church inherited Jewish worship practices. Psalms were sung corporately with simple melodic lines, and oftentimes there were no instruments. Gregorian chants were later developed, which were just simple one-line melodies which were extremely spiritually driven, designed to serve the word, not overshadow it. Music was a vehicle for scripture, not a performance during that time. And then they moved into the medieval to Renaissance period from 600 to 1600. Beauty was ordered towards God then. Music became more complex with the addition of polyphony, multiple voices, with increased musical ability. Still, it was church-centered. In this time, we think of seeing music in sacred masses or structured, reverent compositions. That time, beauty was seen as truth made audible, and the key principle was that the complexity was adaptable if the clarity of the word remains. From there, we moved into the Renaissance period, 1500s. Congregational singing returns. This is really big for worship music, with people like Martin Luther and John Calvin. Martin Luther loved music. He believed music was a gift from God, and he encouraged congregational hymns and used folk-style melodies. On the other hand, John Calvin was much stricter. He would sing psalms only without instruments, simplified just for reverence, I guess. As a result, the hymns became readily available in the language of the people. Theology was embodied in melody, and music was used to teach doctrine. Kind of reflects in Colossians 3:16. Let the word of Christ dwell richly in you, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And we go into the Baroque or classical period, 1600 to 1800. This was God's glory and craft. Composers like Bach and Handel come on the scene. Music becomes more complex, emotionally expressive, and technically advanced, yet it was still God-centered. Bach famously wrote Solo Deo Gloria, which translates to God be the glory alone. Music here models excellence as worship, not entertainment. Then moves into the Romantic period, the 1800s. This turned out to be a shift towards self more. This was kind of a turning point for the music. Music became about personal emotion. The composer's inner world becomes central, and individuals' expression was elevated. This cultural shift eventually affected church music, leading to more subjective language, experience-driven worship, and feelings over doctrine when it was unchecked. Now the 20th century today, popular with our popular music and the technology. Modern music now is shaped by gospel, revivalism, rock, pop, folk, recording technology, and amplification. Now rhythms become dominant, repetition is increased, emotion becomes central, and sometimes the worship leaders become more front-facing. Okay, so that's a brief history here. Throughout, I'm gonna stop and ask for questions. So, do you have anything for now? Great, that makes it go faster. Okay, I want to briefly touch on music theory. I'm sure most of you already know a lot of it, but it's always good to refresh. The goal is to help worship and tech teams understand. We're going to look into the chord chart or number charts as well as just some core music theory concepts here. Start with our general music theory as you pass this out. So keys and scales, these are kind of the fundamentals of it. The key is the home note or chord on the song. A major scale formula follows a whole step, half, whole step, half. With a W representing a whole and H is half. And that's our major scale that most worship music follows. Seen as examples where we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. That's the simple one. And then we build with chords. Chords are built by stacking triads, which are the first, the third, and the fifth of that key. Major scales tend to be bright and happy, major chords, sorry. Minor chords are more serious and emotional. Diminished chords are tense and unstable. A lot of times our worship songs will use the 1, the 4, 5, and 6 minor chords, and of course your other 2s and whatever. And then obviously time signature is huge here too, with the common time between 4/4 and 6/8 that we'll use the most. Important thing here is just focus on staying on beat to really lock in with the drummer when we're playing. When we don't have a drummer, we might decide who to follow, like just the keyboard player, just the guitars, but in general, we always want to follow the drummer, especially since we don't have a click. And rhythm and unity matter more than the fancy playing. So I don't care how good you're playing, if you're not on beat, it's not going to sound good. And that's, can't emphasize that enough. The rhythm matters a lot. And then dynamics. Dynamics should bring with changes in energy and volume. You might build intensity during a chorus or drop back during a bridge or prayer moments. But when we're building our dynamics, we want to communicate, and sometimes we can do that before service. We communicate with eye contacts, hand signals, or agreed cues. We're just following the spirit, because our dynamics of the song should change as we lead people through it. Okay, that's our general music theory. So most of you probably got that. Now I want to talk briefly on our number charts called the Nashville number system. Let's see. Am I on the wrong one? There it is. Number charts are a simple, powerful way to communicate chords and progressions without worrying about the key or signature. Instead of writing G, C, D, E minor, you would write the 1, 4, 5, and 6 minor. This can be really important, useful if you're changing keys on the fly or if you're communicating with a guitar player, because they're always using those cables. So, how does it work? We'll quickly explain it. You assign numbers to the scale degree. In any key, the tonic root note is going to be your 1 chord. And then numbers 1 through 7 or correspond to the note of the major scale. And we mark it with uppercase and lowercase ones. So uppercase is always going to be major, and then you put a lowercase in to indicate minor. Okay, so you all have that. We're going to walk through a simple example here of converting numbers. So in the key of C, as well, we'll start, we have C, G, A minor, and F. Now to translate that into the number chart, we would go 1, 5, 6, 4. So if you're looking on your chart, you can, or your piece of paper, you can follow it where you go to the key of C, and then you see those numbers, those correspond to the number degree that you're assigned to it. So now the leader says, let's do it in G instead. We would translate that by following the numbers and thinking in that terms, and we would go to G, D, E minor, and C. There's no rewriting needed, you just follow the numbers, and a lot of times that can simplify a lot of things. Okay, we doing good? Questions? Does that make sense with the number stuff? Okay.
Well, so on the chart, they're all capital.
Yes, those are capital, that's what you find it, but if you are in a chord chart, you will see a lowercase m right next to it, indicating that it's minor. So everything's always automatically major unless it's otherwise shown, I guess. Yeah, otherwise posted.
Circle of fists.
I have a question. So, in TV shows and movies or whatever, and even in real life, I've seen this. So when someone, these are professional bands, like orchestral bands. So when someone says, "Oh, you know what? Instead of C, let's play it in G." Are they going off of that Nashville?
They are.
Most likely.
Yeah. And a lot of times at that point, you won't even be thinking about chords or number, or what the note is. You're thinking in terms of numbers, and so always try to send number charts so you look at that. But so they're just thinking, well, instead of thinking of it as a G or a C, they just think of that as a 1. So going from, you said C to G, we just know that's 1. Likewise, the F is just corresponds to 4. So when we move into G, you guess it? The 4 in the key of G is C. There it is. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Wow. Yeah.
Yep. Anything else? All right, let's keep going.
There'll be a quiz on this,
Yeah.
especially for the drummers.
You just follow the columns down, the rows and rows. I can't remember which ones are which. Okay, let's transition into some of the biblical theology of music and worship. Music is a gift from God. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation of shadow due to change. James 1:17. Music is a gift from God and part of creation's response to Him. So, worship is God-centered, not self-centered. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due His name, and bring an offering and come into His courts. Psalms 96:8. Sometimes it's far too easy for God in heaven to drift into the background of worship. It can be easy to quickly become fixated on who the worship pastor is, the quality of the sound system, the lights playing the right notes, and of course getting a robust fog machine. Now all of these concerns may have a place, but they cannot become primary. By turning our eyes to heaven, we are reminded that the heart of worship lies in God Himself. The goal of worship can't be evaluated simply by the experience a service produces in the participants, but only by the extent to which the glory of God is truly seen and manifested as a result. The heart of worship, as A.W. Tozer reminds us, is always in God Himself. He says, "It is my opinion that the Christian concept of God current in these middle years of the 12th century is so decent as to be utterly beneath the dignity of the Most High God. And actually, to professed believers, sometimes the amounting to moral calamity. If all the problems of heaven and earth, although they were to confront us together at once, would be nothing compared to the overwhelming problem of God, that He is, what He is like, and what we as a moral being must do about Him." That's from A.W. Tozer, from the Knowledge of the Holy. Biblical worship responds to who God is. It declares what God has done, and it forms God's people. Worship must ask, does this turn us towards God or towards ourselves? So it's God-centered all the time. Next, the word must govern the music. Addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, and singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart. Ephesians 5:19. Music is a carrier of theology, a teacher, and a discipliner. Melody supports the meaning, not the other way around ever. Next, emotion is biblical, but it should be ordered. The Psalms contain emotions such as joy, lament, fear, and hope. But emotion is always directed towards God and shaped by truth. Biblical worship should never chase emotion for its own sake, which I find sometimes happens in today's world as we're so experience driven, but it's about God. And then the form matters. The Bible doesn't mandate our instrument's style or tempo, but it does mandate reverence in Hebrews 12:28-29. Therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, and let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe for our God is a consuming fire. It also mandates order in 1 Corinthians 14:40, but all things should be done decently and in order, and it should be edifying and building up, shown in 1 Corinthians 14:26. What then, brothers, when you come together, each one of you has a hymn, a lesson, a revelation, a tongue, an interpretation. Let all things be done for building up. Music should serve clarity, unity, and truth through reverence, order, and edification. So how do we translate this to modern music, modern worship music? We can ask these 5 questions of any worship song. First, is it theologically true? Second, is God the subject more than me? Third, does the music support congregational singing? 4, does it form the hearts and minds, not just feelings? 5, does it reflect the reverence appropriate to God? Okay, got through that section. We're doing good? Have any thoughts? Keep on going then. Okay, now I'm going to talk about kind of why the tech matters to the gospel and our stewardship of the sound and science. This part is going to get a little bit more technical, but I know you guys can stay with me here. The goal is communication. The gospel cannot be communicated if it's not understood. We want to leverage the tech to help people hear what the pastor's teaching and what the worship band is playing. We can use technology to spread the gospel. One problem that comes up is a problem of retention. In general, we only remember about 10% of what we hear. So if a pastor gives a 30-minute sermon, 45 if you're Baptist, you're only going to remember about 3 minutes of that speech, which is that 10%. But the cool part is by adding visual reinforcement like lyrics, lower thirds, or slides, the retention can triple up to 30%. So that would leave you with 10 minutes of retention, which is a drastic change. So that's one reason our tech can help. Another thing I want to show is just a case study of the acoustics of the Sower's Cove. I think this is all throughout the New Testament, but this is kind of a miracle of physics in the Bible. When Jesus spoke to the 10,000 plus people at the Sower's Cove, how did they hear? Sweetwater wasn't there for Jesus to order up a speaker system and microphone. Well, Jesus didn't necessarily use a supernatural miracle here. He actually used the physics he authored. So, you're asking how it worked then. It worked for a few different reasons. One is the reflective surface. Jesus sat in a boat about 30 feet out on the water, and that water acted as an acoustic mirror, so his speech would bounce off the water up to the people. Second, the seating positions. He had the people sit on the grass because standing, your body absorbs 70% more sound energy. And then it was also this perfect slope. The 70-degree natural amphitheater allowed sound to travel over the crowd without being blocked. It was a perfect natural amphitheater there with no obstructions like rocks or boulders to get in the way. So it was just that perfect 17 degrees how they all would sit there. And then finally, the wind. If you stood out in a boat and spoke in a clear voice, people would hear you a quarter mile away. A specific 4-mile-an-hour breeze coming off the water carries the voice perfectly. If we're 2 miles an hour, it wouldn't carry the speech effectively. And if it were any faster, like 6, it would break the water and it wouldn't reflect off the surface. So at that 4 miles an hour, it's perfect. Jesus used the science and physics he created here at the Sower's Cove to minister to many people there. Okay, this part is going to get very technical. I'm going to talk about the electromagnetic and acoustic spectrum. But you have to bear with me. I'll get through this quickly. I'm trying to build my case for an example here to help prove effectiveness. But before we get in, we always have to start with definitions, especially if you're in CC. So we'll start with frequency or hertz. Frequency is the number of wave cycles per second. Higher frequency is higher pitch in sound or higher energy in light. For example, you tune your car's radio to 88.9 megahertz to listen to Caleb. I don't. I use Apple Music, but whatever. Point proven. Wavelength is the physical distance between the wave peaks. So you have your peak and your trough. That distance is the wavelength. Now the electromagnetic spectrum. The electromagnetic spectrum is the full range of energy waves that travel through space from radio waves to gamma rays. These waves carry information and energy such as radio signals, light, X-rays, and do not require a physical medium to travel. So that's your radio, your Wi-Fi, infrared, visible light, X-rays. Now the acoustic spectrum is the range of sound frequencies that travel through a physical medium like air, water, or solids. It includes all audible, inaudible sound vibrations and is part of the physical world we perceive as sound. An example of that is obviously our human hearing being 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz or 20 kilohertz. Okay, electromagnetic spectrum quickly is DC. It's not that complicated. DC direct current is the flow of electrons in one direction. This is 0 hertz at the lowest possible frequency. Now on the other side you have gamma rays, which are 10 to the 28 hertz and are some of the highest possible frequencies. Extremely high. As you can see, it follows up there all the way through. In the electromagnetic spectrum, the smaller waves carry lower energy and the higher waves carry higher energy. For example, radio waves have an extremely long wavelength, but they carry very little energy and they're non-ionizing. On the other hand, X-rays and gamma rays have very small wavelengths, but enormous amounts of energy to the point where they become ionizing. And quickly, ionizing radiation consists of higher energy waves that are high enough power to ionize atoms or molecules, meaning they can completely remove an electron from the atom. This process creates charged particles, ions, that can break chemical bonds and cause cellular damage, including DNA mutations, which lead to all your health risks or whatever. Or whatever, you know. Then the acoustic spectrum, this one's a little bit easier to understand. The acoustic spectrum is divided into 3 sections. Infrasound, everything below 20 hertz. Audible sound is 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz or 20,000 hertz, which is the range of human hearing. And then ultrasound is everything above 20 kilohertz. This represents the full range of sound frequencies from very low to very high beyond human perception, used in everything from seismic monitoring, infrasound, and medical imaging and ultrasound. Okay, we've got through that. Why does it matter then? These two spectrums, the electromagnetic spectrum and the acoustic spectrum, are part of God's created order to help us communicate. So I need 2 people, quickly, to volunteer. It's not that hard. Okay. You grab that in the tape measure, you grab that in. I want you to pull 20 feet. All the way up. Keep going. Keep going. You got a ways to go.
You have to.
You gotta move.
You got a ways to go.
Okay.
Oh, I see how it is.
Stop soon. Yeah. Yeah.
There you go. 20 feet. Okay. So let's define 20 feet as all electromagnetic radiation, from the lowest frequency radio waves to the highest energy gamma rays. The actual size of the entire visible spectrum, violet to red, is about 400 to 700 nanometers. In the entire electromagnetic spectrum was stretched across this 20-foot tape measure. Everything your eyes will ever see, every color, every sunset, every face would fit in roughly the thickness of this razor blade's edge. That's all of the visible light spectrum. Now to make this visible light spectrum the size of a quarter, just the visible light, you have to pull that tape measure to be approximately 4.6 miles long. Now let's do the same for audible sound. So sound technically has no upper limit, but for realistic physical comparison, we'll use the lowest practical infrasound at 0.01 hertz, which are like your earthquakes, atmospheric waves, and the upper ultrasound used in science and medicine, we'll set that to 100 megahertz, 100 million hertz. So, across the 20 feet is the entire acoustic spectrum. The audible sound range that we can hear, our human ears can hear, is about 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. So on this scale, the range of human hearing is half of this razor blade's edge. That is 0.01 millimeters wide. That's everything you have ever heard. God designed creation to communicate. Light and sound are not accidents, they are instruments of revelation. God's designed creation to communicate. Light and sound are not accidents, they are instruments of revelation. The electromagnetic and the acoustic spectrums aren't just scientific categories, they are ordered systems God established to carry out meaning. Before plants and animals or humans, there was speech and light. This is not incidental, it's fundamental. We read in scripture, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light in Genesis 1:3. Out of all the light God created, he gave our eyes just to see that little razor blade amount. Yet sunset still preach his glory, scripture is read by visible light, and the gospel is spread through what we can see. In the same way, when God speaks, creation responds. Psalms 33:6 reads, "By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their hosts." God quite literally used audible words to speak the world into existence through his divine power. The acoustic spectrum reflects vibration, order, and intention perfectly ordained by God. Out of all sound God created, he made our ears just to hear that small half a razor blade amount of space. And still faith comes by hearing, worship is sung, and the gospel is proclaimed through it. 4 things on this earth are small, but they are exceedingly wise. The ants are a people not strong, yet they provide food in the summer. The rock badgers are people not mighty, yet they make their homes in the cliffs. The locusts have no king, yet all of them march in rank. The lizard you can take in your hands, yet it's in king's palaces. Proverbs 30:24-28. I don't know what a rock badger is, but I do know that God uses even small things to perform mighty actions. So if even the small parts of creation that we can hear and see are already so beautiful, I cannot imagine what God can hear and see in heaven right now, and what we might someday be able to experience when we're with him in heaven one day. Okay, so with that being said, sound team, you are stewards of the audible slice of God's humanity. You should prioritize clarity over chaos, proclamation over noise. We read in Romans 10:17, so faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. Lighting and visuals team, you are stewards of the visible slice of God's light. You focus on mood and relatability, revelation and not distraction. Your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Psalms 119:105. Worship leaders, vocalists, and musicians, you steward the word and sing it to his sheep. The truth you sing rides on these sound waves. Praises move through the air God designed. Let everything that has breath praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Psalms 156. Also remember that Jesus is the ultimate light of the world. Again, Jesus spoke to them saying, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." John 8:12. We do not create the message. We do not create the light. We do not create the sound. We serve what God has already created and use it to glorify him. And these things really matter. We remove distractions like bad sound, green screen, grainy video, flickering lights, poor musical transitions, because they're distractions from the gospel. Audio matters because faith comes by hearing. If the word cannot be clearly heard, it cannot be clearly received. Audio doesn't add power to the gospel. It removes barriers so the gospel can do its work. Video matters because we are a visually oriented society. God uses light and sound to guide his people. Lyrics, scripture, and visuals help the congregation flow, remember, and participate together. Visuals don't replace the word, they direct attention to it. Worship team matters. The worship team serves a musical servant to the word, not as performers for an audience. God has always used sung truth to shape, teach, and unite his people. Singing places God's work deep into our hearts and memory. Music helps the truth stay with us long after the service ends. And most importantly, you matter because God works through the faithful services of his people. As each of you has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's very grace. 1 Peter 4:10. When God says do it, just say yes. He invented physics so he can help you handle that feedback or that tricky instrumental line. Also think of your characters over cables. Being a great musician and having the technical skill to know what the knobs and buttons do is useless without a servant's heart for Christ. Okay, we got to another section. Any questions for that one? Keep on moving then. Okay, now the media and production integration, how we can serve together. The big idea here is worship and production teams are not separate teams. They are one ministry serving one mission. Now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit, and there are varieties of service, but the same Lord, and there are varieties of activities, but the same God who empowers them all and everyone. To each of you is given a manifestation of the Spirit for common good. The worship team produces the sound. The production team you steward the sound. Neither works without each other. In this context, excellence is not performance. It's love expressed through preparation. So why does the production team need consistency? Audio engineers don't control sound. They manage what they're given. And these sound systems are not perfect mechanical machines. They require consistent input, reasonable volume, and stable technique. When musicians are inconsistent, engineers chase problems. They do what we call mix surfing, where you have all your hands on the board at once and you're surfing it. And that just leads to the word becoming harder to hear and unclear. Contradicting that, in 1 Corinthians 14:33 says, "For God is not a God of confusion, but a God of peace, as all the churches of the saints." So, that being said, microphone technique for the vocalist. This is very important. I put 3 exclamation marks in my notes. So first, distance. The ideal distance between your microphone is going to be 2 to 4 inches. Now, what you can do when you get up there is a fun technique, is just put your fist in between the microphone, and that's perfect distance. So you want to stay consistent with that distance. Don't eat the microphone and don't drift away when singing softly. As a good rule, if your head or the microphone moves, the mix changes. Second most important thing here is your angle. Once you sing across the mic, not directly in it, at a slight angle, this reduces the plosives, which is like your P's and B's, which contain just a lot of noise, and they get in that microphone and make that big popping sound. So when you're singing at an angle across the capsule, that's the best thing. And then your volume control. Don't whisper verses and scream choruses. Dynamics are musical, but extremes are technical problems. The goal is musical expression that still allows intelligibility. That's a big word. So what not to do: don't cuff the mic, don't cover the grill, don't tap the microphone, don't sing into the side. These all destroy tone and feedback control. So with that, what should you sing during sound check? This is a huge help. What I don't want you to sing, first of all, is not full worship songs. I don't want you to scream choruses or whisper prayers or just random riffs. Instead, what you should sing is the ABC song. Why, you might ask? Because it covers vowels, it has an even pitch and consistent dynamics, and is familiar to everyone. Alternatively, you could sing a verse or chorus of a song that you know by heart and has high dynamics, but I prefer you stick to the ABC songs. When you sing that at real service volume with good mic technique and 100% confidence. The goal of that is to give the engineer a predictable signal to EQ. The engineer is only trying to make you sound your best. Nobody's against you here. Okay, musicians, don't think you got away. I want to talk about gain staging. Before I do that, we got to go back to our definitions. So, simple definition. Gain staging is setting each level of the signal chain so that sound is strong, clean, and not distorted. This goes from the input, your instrument, or whatever it is, all the way to the speakers. So, what to do? During sound check, play your instrument consistently at the loudest possible volume you think you will use during the service. If you have a volume setting on your instrument, you can set that to 3/4 and let the engineer know what you're working with. Try to keep your volume consistent from song to song, although you can still be dynamic. So key truths here is if your volume changes drastically, the entire gain structure breaks. You are a part of the signal chain here. Okay, how the musicians can serve the audio team. For vocalists, sing at performance volume during sound check. Be honest, do not save your voice and trust the engineer. For instrumentalists, set your tone before rehearsal. Don't change amp volume mid-service, and avoid distracting or drastic patch changes without warning. So if you have 2 different patches that have drastic changes, let us know so we can compensate accordingly, because that can still be dynamic and musical. But all things should be done decently and in order, 1 Corinthians 14:10. All right, now our communication and humility. Engineers are not your enemy, they're just trying to serve you by setting you up for success. Everyone is serving the same goal, present the gospel with clarity. If you need something from someone, communicate that intentionally and clearly with them. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in all with humility count others more significant than yourselves. Philippians 2, verse 3. Okay, and final commission here. We do not worship the microphones, we do not worship the lights, we do not worship the sound system. We worship the God who gave us sound and lights. We are stewards to them so his word can be heard and seen and believed. So whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. 1 Corinthians 10:31. Okay, we made it. Any questions from that section there? Understand your point? Yeah.
Is it always a hard rule about that distance to the microphone?
Not always, because let's say you might sing something extremely loud, you can pull back there a little bit. But in general, I think it's extremely helpful for like most of the stuff you're doing.
Well, okay,
Go
so
there.
what does it mean when you have a vocalist and you're eating the mic and you're still not getting enough signal?
The sound team will take care of it.
Well,
What if they're good?
there could be a lot
I'm not
of
saying
things
no
that could
one's
be
like-
that. I think you could lower that to that 2-inch mark, because your fist is probably closer to 4 inches there. And then also that would probably have to be addressed in the gain staging section, and it might even come down to a broken microphone. But probably what it's also is just not singing 100% with confidence, because God has given each one of you a voice to use for the glory of God. So I think there's a lot of things that come to it. It just depends on that specific scenario. So to answer your question, maybe move it to 2 inches.
Yeah, and I think what you just said about confidence, singing with confidence, touched on what John said earlier, and just how, and I've seen it with most of you at different points over the last few months. When you're really comfortable with the song, you're playing with confidence, and it just helps tie everyone else together. It gives them something to grasp on. And when you're not, or you're starting a song with, let's say, confidence or accepted level, and then suddenly you just kind of like, oh, I'm not sure about here. People notice. I notice. I'm sitting like, oh no, please no, you know. And I'm like back there rooting for you guys, like, come on, you know.
Well, it's a ripple effect too, because the musicians hear the vocalist pulling back, so they pull back.
Right.
And then the whole structure of it goes away, and the way you rehearsed it falls apart, and somebody's waiting on someone else to pick it back up.
Right.
And so there's got to be a plan. You know that's going to happen because you're nervous, and something's going to happen, and people are going to pull back. So you always have to have a fallback of who's going to take it to that upper level again if we start pulling back.
Yeah.
What is it? The guitar player? Is it the keyboard player? Is it the vocalist? Somebody's got to notice it and push it back up to that intensity level.
And it goes for everyone, even musicians, if you use
Right.
that intensity. But especially the vocalists, because you guys are leading the songs. You are the worship leaders in that moment, driving it. And if the vocalists aren't there, the instrumentalists aren't there either, because we follow the vocalists and the drums, especially. And so our drum section, I like that. But yeah, I think one of the biggest things is just having 100% confidence, because it's not about being perfect.
Where does confidence come from, Austin?
It comes only from the Lord, because we're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to serve God, and we know with the worship music, doesn't matter what we do up there, as long as we're honoring Him, that's what matters. And so that confidence should be rooted in Christ, and come straight from Him.
Yeah.
And
But do you think
when you
practice?
call on God,
Do you think practice boosts your confidence?
yes, definitely a lot of practice can help. And that's key too, is when you're knowing all these points in your theory and your psalms, you're not thinking about it so much.
Right.
You're just playing it. You can be in that moment. But yeah, practice. That probably plays a huge role. What else we got? Okay, let's land this plane. From the beginning.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What should our gain settings be at?
3/4 is going to be a great starting point. So 75%, 3/4, and for basically everything. And then if it's too loud or too quiet, communicate that with the engineer before you go changing things, and we'll compensate. But for like 90% of things, 3/4, 75%, would you say?
Well, yeah, I would say that rule works well with acoustic instruments, like acoustic
Yeah.
guitars, because for whatever reason, when you turn that up all the way, the signal gets distorted and gets crazy. Electric instruments, it's a little different. You can, have the electric guitar turned up all the way, or the bass have the volume up all the way, because they're passive instruments, and it's not going to blow us out.
But your pedal board,
That's right. That's a different story, right?
And sometimes that's part of your dynamic playing, is adjusting the volume on your guitar. But generally, that 3/4 mark for your pedal board, your acoustic guitar, your keyboard, your any digital rig, your electric drum kit, whatever. Does that answer your question?
And then how much are we allotted to use for overdrive? Because if we're trying to get that bold sound, or cleanish, but still with a little bit of on it, how much?
So if you're going for the overdrive, that's part of your tone. And what you're gonna notice when you're setting that is overdrive affects the gain a lot. So when you're trying to get that grit, sometimes that's adding distortion, and that's what you're trying to do. But if you find that's getting to a point where it's clipping the audio, where it reaches the top of because the way digital recording works, it reaches a peak, and your interface or whatever just won't accept anything past that, so it just gets rid of it. So for overdrive, turn it up to where it's getting the tone you want, but also make sure it serves the song, and you're not doing it just because it's a cool patch. Because
Can I add to that?
yeah.
So electric guitar players, there's a difference between overdrive and distortion. You know that, right?
Yes.
So if you're in your playing and you sound like you're trying to play speed metal, or you have a violin in your hand, your tone is probably not good. The number one thing as an electric guitar player is finding your tone. And you're not going to discover that through a pedal. You're not going to discover that through overdrive or anything else. That comes out of your fingers. You have to master your instrument with how you play. I could pick up any guitar and I'm going to sound like me. You're going to pick up any guitar and sound like you. You picked up my guitar and sounded like you today. So it doesn't matter your instrument. You have to get your tone right. So I would say to you, yes, it's great to bring some crunch into it and some distortion to add power to the song. But if it's tweaked out tone, which I've heard before and I've done it before, it's not helping anybody, because it's just distracting the singers, and it just doesn't fit. So I would say to you, as an electric guitar player, your voice is your tone. And it comes out of your style, it comes out of what you listen to, but study tone on an electric guitar. Acoustic guitars, it's all about your fingers 100%, but like electric guitar, you could pick up anybody's tone like you could play Alvin Collins, you could play Stevie Ray Vaughan, or you could play anything from like Nirvana or Casting Crowns guitar players got an amazing tone. What I love about worship music, and you listen to the electric guitar players, their tones are perfect. I mean, they study and concentrate on making their tones right. And so I would just say, as an electric guitar player, study yourself and study your tone and how that comes out, and then you can add in the crunch based on how your tone is, and it'll always fit. Does that make sense?
Don't let that distract from playing the right notes. Reverb is great, but it doesn't hide all of the right notes. I want you to grow as a musician.
You can also always ask a fellow, especially electric guitarists, if that's your instrument, whatever your instrument is, you can ask others who play the same instrument what their opinions are on your tones. You can get a lot of good input from that as well.
That's good, Hunter.
Yeah, that's great.
That's good.
Like John Mayer.
You how to build a patch
like-
too.
Yeah.
I've done that before.
You guys know who John Mayer is, right?
Yeah.
John Mayer spent a decade mastering his tone. He wasn't trying to be somebody else. He was trying to figure out who he was with his tone. And you hear John Mayer play, and you know it's John Mayer. You know? You just know. That's John Mayer. And he's playing a jazz song in probably in like a 100-person set. That's John Mayer playing. You can just hear it. And so that's what you need to strive for, if you got that drive to do that.
William, there's also a lot of information out there, like what Hunter was saying. Ask other guitar players, but these different praise songs that you guys are choosing and whatnot, you can go online and find, whatever guitar player is playing the song, what their chain is, and so much of it is all digitalized now anyway. And I know with the unit you have, you could probably dial in and find a patch that works
That's
with it, and for each particular song, and then through that you'll probably find a commonality between all these different patches. Like, okay, I don't have to necessarily switch. I can find one that works for me, and that's kind of where finding your voice is as a guitar player, when you're playing those leads or even rhythm. So.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll close this out. From the beginning, God has revealed himself through order. Before there were instruments, there was vibration. Before there was music or tech teams, there was a God who spoke and creation responded. Western music did begin as an invention. It began as a discovery of what God had already made. Sound and light didn't evolve by accident. They were authored with intention. And worship has never been about performance. It's always been about proclamation. Every microphone, every chord, every fader, every lyric slide, every lighting cue is a stewardship of something God has already made. We don't create the message, we don't create the power, and we don't create the glory. We remove distractions so the word can be heard. We bring order so truth can be seen, and we serve one another just as Jesus did in a collaborative effort to advance the gospel. So pursue excellence, not to be impressive, but to be faithful. Seek unity, not for comfort, but for clarity. And remember this, God uses the small, faithful things to do mighty, eternal work. Thank you.